The chamber was massive. Ambassador Catherine Blake stood in the center of it, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Above her, around her, everywhere she looked, there were aliens, hundreds of different species, each one sitting in their designated section of the great spherical room. The Galactic Senate Chamber orbited Zentara Prime, the capital world of the oldest civilization in the galaxy. This was where decisions were made. This was where the fate of worlds was decided. Catherine had practiced her speech 1,000 times. She had prepared for every question, every objection. Earth wanted to join the Galactic Senate. Humanity had finally achieved faster-than-light travel. They had made peaceful contact with alien civilizations. They had proven themselves worthy, or so she thought. She began her presentation. Her voice echoed through the chamber as she spoke about Earth's achievements. She talked about human art, human science, human culture. She explained how humanity had overcome centuries of war and division to unite as one planet. She showed images of Earth's cities, its beautiful oceans, its diverse population working together toward a common future. The aliens listened. Some seemed interested. Others looked bored. A few were clearly hostile, their alien features twisted in expressions that even Catherine could read as disgust. When she finished, there was silence. Then Senator Krelvar stood up. Krelvar was a Zetharian, a member of one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. His species had been traveling the stars for 10,000 years. They had helped write the laws that governed the Senate. They were respected, feared, and obeyed by nearly everyone. His voice boomed through the chamber. He did not speak to Catherine directly. Instead, he addressed the other senators as if she was not even worth acknowledging. He called humanity dangerous. He called them violent. He showed evidence of human wars, human conflicts, human suffering. He pulled up images of Earth's bloody history and displayed them for everyone to see. Catherine tried to respond. She tried to explain that humanity had learned from its mistakes, that every species had a violent past, that Earth deserved a chance. But Krelvar talked over her. Other senators joined him one by one, each adding their voice to the chorus of rejection. The humans were too young, they said, too primitive, too aggressive. They had not earned their place among the civilized species of the galaxy. They needed more time. Perhaps in another 1,000 years they might be ready. But not now. Never now. When the vote came, Catherine already knew what the result would be. She had seen it in their eyes, heard it in their voices. The aliens did not see humans as equals. They saw them as children, as barbarians, as a problem to be contained. The final count was 623 votes against, 224 votes in favor. Earth's petition was denied. But it was worse than just denial. The Senate passed a second resolution, one that Catherine had not expected. Humanity would be quarantined. No human ship could travel beyond 50 light-years from Earth. No human colony could be established outside the solar system. Trade with Earth would be limited and strictly monitored. The galaxy was telling humanity to stay in its corner and be quiet. Catherine returned to her ship in a daze. Her assistant, a young diplomat named Peter Hall, tried to console her. But there was nothing to say. They had failed. Earth had reached out to the stars, and the stars had slapped them down. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence, of anger, of humiliation. Catherine spent the time writing her report, though she knew no words could truly capture what had happened. The galaxy had rejected humanity not because of what they had done, but because of what they were. Young, different, threatening to the established order. When she arrived at Earth, she was immediately summoned to an emergency meeting of the United Earth Government. The leaders of every nation on Earth gathered in Geneva to hear her report. Catherine stood before them and told them everything. She did not soften the blow. She told them exactly what the aliens thought of humanity. She told them about the quarantine, about the restrictions, about the contempt in Krelvar's voice when he spoke about Earth. The room erupted in anger. Some leaders demanded war. Others called for isolation, arguing that if the galaxy did not want humanity, then humanity did not need the galaxy. But President Helen Martinez, the leader of the United Earth Government, raised her hand for silence. Martinez was a practical woman. She had led Earth through the unification wars. She had negotiated the treaties that brought the last independent nations into the global government. She knew how to turn defeat into opportunity. When she spoke, everyone listened. She said they would not accept the quarantine. She said they would not accept being treated as children, but they would not start a war they could not win. Instead, they would do what humanity had always done best. They would innovate. They would adapt. They would find a way around every obstacle the galaxy put in their path. Martinez authorized a new program. They called it the Prometheus Initiative, named after the ancient Greek titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. The program would have unlimited funding. It would bring together the best scientists, the best engineers, the best military minds on Earth. Its goal was simple: make the quarantine meaningless. Develop technologies that would let humanity go anywhere in the galaxy without needing the Senate's permission. Catherine was given a new role. She would no longer be an ambassador to the Galactic Senate. Instead, she would be the chief diplomatic strategist for the Prometheus Initiative. Her job would be to identify potential allies, to gather intelligence to prepare for the day when Earth would return to the galactic stage. But this time they would return on their own terms. In a secret research facility at the edge of the solar system, Dr. Lisa Grant received the news about the Senate's vote. She had been working on theoretical physics problems for years, exploring strange properties of quantum fields that most scientists thought were useless curiosities. When she heard about the quarantine, something changed in her mind. Those useless curiosities suddenly seemed very interesting indeed. She pulled up her old research notes and started working. The aliens used hyperspace drives to travel faster than light. Those drives left signatures that could be tracked and monitored. That was how they enforced the quarantine. They would detect any human ship trying to leave the restricted zone and intercept it. But what if there was another way to travel? What if humanity could move through space without using hyperspace at all? Admiral Frank Collins stood in the command center of Earth's Defense Fleet headquarters. He watched the news broadcasts from across the planet. People were angry. They felt insulted. They wanted action. Collins understood. He had spent his entire career preparing to defend Earth from threats. Now the threat was clear. The galaxy itself was against them, but Collins was not worried. He was excited. For years he had studied alien military doctrine. He had watched their exercises, analyzed their tactics, read their strategic writings. He knew their strengths. More importantly, he knew their weaknesses. The aliens had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten how to really fight. They relied on old technologies, old strategies, old assumptions. They thought numbers and experience would always win. Collins smiled. Humanity had never forgotten how to fight. They had spent their entire history at war with each other. Now finally they had a common enemy. Now they could take everything they had learned from centuries of human conflict and turn it against an enemy that had no idea what was coming. Far away, on Zentara Prime, Senator Krelvar celebrated his victory. The dangerous humans had been contained. The galaxy was safe. Order had been preserved. He had no way of knowing that his victory would be the shortest in galactic history. He had no way of knowing that the vote he had just won would destroy everything his civilization had built. The galaxy had voted against Earth. That vote would become their last mistake. The clock was ticking. Humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you backed them into a corner. 5 years passed. 5 years of work, of research, of preparation. The galaxy had forgotten about Earth. The quarantine was in place, and the aliens assumed humanity was contained. They were wrong. Icarus Station floated at the edge of the solar system, far from prying eyes. It was the largest research facility humanity had ever built. Thousands of scientists worked there in complete secrecy. The station's existence was known only to a handful of people in the Earth government. To the rest of the galaxy, it did not exist at all. Dr. Lisa Grant had barely slept in 5 years. She lived on Icarus Station, spending every waking hour in her laboratory. Her hair had turned gray. Her eyes had dark circles under them. But she was smiling. After 5 years of failure, of dead ends, of theories that did not work, she had finally done it. The quantum displacement drive. That was what she called it. It did not work like alien hyperspace drives. Those drives opened tunnels through a different dimension, allowing ships to travel faster than light. But those tunnels could be detected. They left traces that could be followed and monitored. That was how the aliens enforced their borders. Lisa's drive worked differently. It did not move through hyperspace at all. Instead, it created a bubble of altered spacetime around the ship. Inside that bubble, the normal rules of physics were temporarily suspended. The ship could then move to a new location instantly, without actually traveling through the space in between. One moment it was here, the next moment it was there. No tunnel, no trace, no way to detect or track it. The first test was small. They mounted the drive on a probe and sent it to Mars. One moment the probe was at Icarus Station. The next moment it appeared in orbit around Mars, exactly where they had aimed it. The scientists cheered. They had done it. They had broken the quarantine without the aliens even knowing it was possible. But Admiral Collins wanted more than a probe. He wanted a full test. He wanted to send a ship deep into alien territory and bring it back safely. He wanted to prove that humanity could go anywhere in the galaxy without asking permission. He called for volunteers. Captain Nathan Ross stepped forward immediately. He was a reconnaissance specialist, trained in stealth operations. He had spent years studying alien patrol patterns and sensor networks. He knew their blind spots, their weaknesses, their routines. If anyone could sneak into alien space and return, it was him. They gave Ross a small ship called the Shadow. It was equipped with the new quantum drive and the most advanced stealth systems humanity could build. Its hull was coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves. Its heat signature was minimized. Its power systems were designed to run silent. It was a ghost ship, invisible to anyone who did not know exactly where to look. Ross's mission was simple but dangerous. Jump to the Zitharian home system, 300 light-years from Earth. Survey their military installations. Map their defense networks. Gather as much intelligence as possible. Then come home without being detected. If he was caught, Earth would deny any knowledge of the mission. He would be on his own. Ross sat in the pilot's chair of the Shadow and powered up the quantum drive. The calculations were complex. One mistake and he could appear inside a planet or in the middle of a star, or scattered across light-years of space. But Lisa had checked the math 1,000 times. The drive would work. It had to work. He activated the drive. There was no sound, no flash of light, no sensation of movement. One moment he was looking at Icarus Station through his viewport. The next moment he was looking at a massive blue planet surrounded by orbital stations and warships. He had jumped 300 light-years in an instant. He was in the heart of Zitharian space and they had no idea he was there. Ross spent 3 days in the system. He mapped every installation, cataloged every ship, recorded every patrol route. The Zitharians had dozens of military bases, hundreds of warships, thousands of defense platforms. They were powerful, but they were also complacent. Their sensors were designed to detect hyperspace signatures. They never even looked for ships that traveled through normal space. To them, the Shadow was invisible. When Ross had gathered enough data, he activated the drive again and jumped back to Icarus Station. The scientists and military officers who had been waiting for him erupted in celebration. He had done it. He had proven that the quantum drive worked in real conditions. More importantly, he had proven that humanity could spy on the aliens without them ever knowing. Admiral Collins studied the intelligence Ross had brought back. He saw the gaps in the Zitharian defenses. He saw their outdated tactics. He saw a military that had not fought a real war in thousands of years. He smiled. The aliens thought their numbers would protect them. They were wrong. While Lisa worked on improving the quantum drive, Dr. Alan Chen worked on weapons. He was the chief designer for the Terran Defense Initiative. His job was to create weapons that could defeat alien ships. For years, he had been frustrated. Human weapons were less powerful than alien weapons. Human shields were weaker. In a straight fight, an alien warship would destroy a human ship every time. But the quantum drive changed everything. Chen did not need to build ships that could stand and fight. He could build ships that appeared, struck, and vanished before the enemy could respond. He designed new plasma cannons that could punch through alien shields with a single shot. He designed shield generators that only needed to hold for a few seconds because the ship would jump away before the aliens could fire back. Chen worked with Lisa to integrate the new technologies. They designed a new class of warship. It was smaller than alien battleships, faster, more agile. It could appear anywhere on the battlefield, strike with devastating force, and disappear before the enemy could react. They called it the Valkyrie class. The first one was already under construction in secret shipyards hidden throughout the solar system. Commander Jake Morrison was chosen to command the first Valkyrie. He was one of Earth's best combat pilots. with experience flying everything from atmospheric fighters to space interceptors. When he saw the specifications for the new ship, he whistled in appreciation. This was not just a warship. This was a revolution in warfare. Morrison began training with the quantum drive systems. It was unlike anything he had ever flown. Normal space combat followed predictable patterns. Ships maneuvered, trying to get into firing position while avoiding enemy fire. But the Valkyrie did not maneuver. It jumped. One moment it was here. The next moment it was behind the enemy firing. Then it was gone again before they could respond. He practiced for months, learning to think in a completely new way. He had to anticipate where the enemy would be, jump to that location, fire, and jump away before they could target him. It was like playing chess at the speed of thought. One mistake would be fatal. But Morrison was very good at not making mistakes. While the military prepared, Ambassador Catherine Blake worked on the diplomatic front. She knew that Earth could not win by military force alone. They needed allies. She began reaching out to younger species, those that had been marginalized by the Senate just as humanity had been. She offered technology, assistance, friendship. Slowly, carefully, she began building a network of species that resented the old galactic order. President Martinez called a meeting of the Earth Council. Admiral Collins presented his plan. Operation Checkmate, he called it. It was a series of coordinated demonstrations designed to prove that the quarantine was meaningless. Human ships would appear throughout the galaxy, showing everyone that humanity could no longer be contained. The Council approved the plan unanimously. 5 years ago, the galaxy had voted to isolate Earth. Now Earth would show them what a mistake that had been. The shipyards worked around the clock. The Valkyrie was joined by 49 more ships just like it. Crews were trained. Weapons were tested. Plans were finalized. Lisa Grant stood in her laboratory one last time before the operation began. She thought about the vote that had rejected humanity. She thought about the contempt in the aliens' voices. She thought about 5 years of work, of sacrifice, of determination. She had done her part. She had given humanity the tool they needed to break free. Admiral Collins gave the order. Operation Checkmate was approved to begin. 50 ships powered up their quantum drives. 50 crews prepared to show the galaxy that humanity would not be contained. The quarantine was about to be broken. The galaxy was about to learn that voting against Earth had been their last mistake. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the Valkyrie. Around him, his bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for months. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could do. The first phase of Operation Checkmate was simple. 12 human ships would appear simultaneously in orbit around 12 different Senate worlds. They would broadcast a message. Then they would vanish before any response could arrive. The goal was not to threaten or attack. The goal was to prove a point. Humanity could go anywhere. The quarantine meant nothing. Morrison checked his coordinates one last time. His target was Zentara Prime, the capital of the Galactic Senate itself. Right in the heart of enemy territory. Right where they would least expect a human ship to appear. He smiled. This was going to be fun. He gave the order. The quantum drive activated. One moment, the Valkyrie was in deep space near Earth. The next moment, it hung in orbit above Zentara Prime, surrounded by dozens of alien ships and orbital stations. Alarms immediately began blaring on every alien vessel in the system. They had detected an unknown ship, but they had no idea how it had gotten there. Morrison opened a broadcast on all frequencies. His message was simple and direct. Humanity is no longer contained. We come in peace, but we will not be ignored. The quarantine is over. Accept it. Before any alien ship could move, before any weapon could target his vessel, Morrison jumped away. The Valkyrie vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. All across the galaxy, 11 other human ships did the same thing. They appeared in orbit around major Senate worlds, broadcast their message, and vanished. The timing was perfect. Every ship jumped at exactly the same moment. The effect was devastating. Within minutes, every major government in the galaxy knew that something had changed. The humans had broken the quarantine. The galactic news networks exploded with reports. How had the humans done it? Where had they gotten the technology? What did they want? The Senate called an emergency session, but no one had any answers. The humans had appeared and vanished like ghosts. There was no way to track them, no way to predict where they would show up next. Phase 2 began 3 days later. Human ships started appearing along the major trade routes, but this time they were not just broadcasting messages. They were offering protection. Merchant vessels that had been terrorized by pirates for years suddenly found themselves defended by human warships that appeared from nowhere, destroyed the pirates, and vanished again. Commander Sarah Mitchell led one of these operations. Her ship, the Guardian, jumped into a system where 3 pirate vessels were attacking a cargo hauler. The pirates never saw her coming. The Guardian appeared directly behind the largest pirate ship and opened fire. The pirate vessel exploded in seconds. The other 2 pirates tried to run, but Mitchell jumped ahead of them and cut off their escape. Within 5 minutes, all 3 pirate ships were disabled or destroyed. The cargo hauler sent a message of thanks. Mitchell responded with a simple statement: "Humanity protects those who need protection. We will be watching." Then the Guardian vanished, jumping to another system where pirates were reported. In 3 weeks, human ships destroyed or captured 15 different pirate organizations that had operated with impunity for decades. The merchant guilds were delighted. The pirates were gone, and trade routes that had been dangerous for years were suddenly safe. But the Senate was furious. The humans were operating freely throughout the galaxy, ignoring all laws and treaties. They were acting as if the quarantine did not exist, because for them it did not. Senator Krelvar called for military action. He argued that humanity had to be dealt with decisively. They were violating galactic law. They were disrupting the established order. They needed to be taught a lesson. Other senators agreed. A motion was put forward to send an enforcement fleet to Earth and force humanity to submit to Senate authority. But some senators hesitated. They asked the obvious question: how do you enforce a quarantine against ships that can appear anywhere without warning? How do you catch an enemy you cannot track? The humans had demonstrated capabilities that no one in the galaxy possessed. Sending a fleet might not be a show of strength. It might be a disaster. While the Senate debated, Phase 3 of Operation Checkmate began. This time the target was military. A Zytharian battle fleet was patrolling near a contested border system. Their mission was to enforce the quarantine by intercepting any human ships that tried to leave the restricted zone. Commander Morrison's squadron jumped directly into the middle of their formation. 12 human ships appeared, surrounding 30 Zytharian warships. For a moment there was complete silence. The Zytharian commander could not believe what he was seeing. Human ships, deep in Zytharian space, surrounding his entire fleet. It was impossible. But it was happening. Morrison opened a communication channel. His voice was calm and professional. He told the Zytharian commander that his fleet was surrounded. He explained that human weapons could destroy every Zytharian ship before they could fire a single shot. He gave the commander a choice: withdraw peacefully or be destroyed. The commander had 60 seconds to decide. The Zytharian commander looked at his tactical display. The human ships were positioned perfectly. They had firing solutions on every vessel in his fleet. His sensors showed that their weapons were charged and ready. He was a veteran of 100 battles, but he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that could appear anywhere. An enemy that held all the advantages. He made the only rational choice. He ordered his fleet to withdraw. As the Zytharian ships turned and jumped to hyperspace, Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Not a single shot had been fired. Not a single life had been lost. But the message was clear. Human ships could appear anywhere, anytime. They could surround and destroy any alien fleet they chose. The balance of power had shifted. Humanity was no longer the weak species that needed to be protected from itself. Humanity was now a force that could challenge anyone. Back on Earth, Ambassador Catherine Blake watched the news reports with satisfaction. The galaxy was in an uproar. Some species were demanding action against Earth, but others were reconsidering their positions. The younger species, the ones that had been marginalized by the Senate, were openly praising humanity's actions. They saw Earth as a challenge to the old order, a chance for change. Blake began receiving messages from several of these species. They wanted to meet. They wanted to talk about cooperation, about alliances, about building a new order that did not depend on the ancient species that had dominated the galaxy for so long. Blake smiled. This was exactly what she had hoped for. Earth was not just breaking the quarantine. They were building a coalition, but not everyone was pleased. On Zentara Prime, Senator Krelvar raged in the Senate chamber. He demanded action. He called the human actions an act of war. He argued that if the Senate did not respond decisively, they would lose all credibility. Other senators from the older species agreed. They could not allow a young species like humanity to challenge their authority. It set a dangerous precedent. Finally, after days of debate, the Senate voted. They would send a punitive expedition to Earth. A massive fleet of 200 warships from 7 different species would travel to the human solar system. They would blockade Earth and force humanity to accept Senate authority. If the humans resisted, the fleet would use force. The galaxy would learn that no one, not even these upstart humans, could defy the Senate. Senator Krelvar volunteered to lead the expedition personally. He wanted to see the look on human faces when they realized their rebellion was over. He wanted to be there when Earth surrendered. The Senate approved his appointment. The fleet began assembling at the edge of human space. Captain Nathan Ross, still conducting reconnaissance missions in his stealth ship Shadow, detected the fleet's movements and reported back to Earth. Admiral Collins received the intelligence and smiled. "Let them come," he said. "Let them bring their fleet. Let them think they have the advantage. They are walking into a trap and they do not even know it." The alien fleet jumped into hyperspace heading for Earth. They expected to find a frightened planet, desperate to negotiate. What they would find instead was a lesson in why you should never underestimate humanity. The Battle of Saul was about to begin. The alien fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 200 warships, the largest military force assembled in centuries. Their sensors immediately began scanning for human ships. They expected to find a desperate defense, a hastily organized fleet trying to protect Earth. What they found instead was silence. Admiral Frank Collins stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the solar system. The alien fleet was exactly where he had predicted they would be. Everything was going according to plan. Collins had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He knew the aliens would come. He knew they would bring overwhelming force. He also knew they had no idea what they were walking into. The solar system was not just defended. It was a weapon. Every asteroid, every moon, every space station had been turned into part of the most elaborate trap in military history. Senator Krelvar sat on the bridge of his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Pride of Zentara. He looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. 200 warships against whatever pathetic forces the humans could muster. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. He opened a communication channel to Earth. His message was simple. The humans had 30 minutes to surrender unconditionally. They would accept Senate authority. They would dismantle their military. They would submit to galactic law. If they refused, the fleet would destroy every human installation in space and blockade Earth until they starved. Krelvar expected the humans to beg for mercy. He expected fear. What he got was laughter. Admiral Collins appeared on Krelvar's screen. The human admiral was smiling. He thanked Krelvar for the generous offer of 30 minutes. He said he would need about 5. Then he gave Krelvar a counteroffer. The alien fleet could withdraw immediately. If they chose to attack, they would not leave the solar system alive. Collins recommended withdrawal. Krelvar's face turned an interesting shade of purple. He cut the transmission and ordered the fleet to advance. The alien fleet began moving toward Earth in a standard battle formation. They advanced slowly, their sensors scanning constantly for human ships. They detected nothing. No ships, no weapons platforms, no defenses. It seemed too easy. Krelvar grew suspicious, but his pride would not let him stop. He ordered the fleet to continue. When the alien fleet reached the orbit of Neptune, the trap sprang. Automated weapons platforms appeared from nowhere, quantum jumping into position around the alien ships. Each platform was small, barely larger than a fighter, but each one carried enough firepower to cripple a warship, and there were thousands of them. The platforms opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through space, hammering into alien shields. The aliens tried to return fire, but the platforms vanished before they could be targeted. They would appear, fire, and jump away in seconds. The alien fleet could not hit an enemy that refused to stay in one place. Krelvar ordered his ships to tighten formation, to protect each other with overlapping shields. It was standard defensive doctrine, proven effective over thousands of years, but it did not work against an enemy that could appear anywhere. The human platform simply jumped inside the formation and fired at point-blank range. 3 alien cruisers exploded in the first minute. 5 more were crippled. The fleet began to panic. Their commanders shouted contradictory orders. Some ships tried to advance. Others tried to retreat. The perfect formation dissolved into chaos. And that was when Commander Morrison arrived. The Valkyrie and 11 other human warships jumped directly into the center of the alien fleet. They appeared so close to the enemy ships that the aliens had no time to react. Morrison's squadron opened fire, targeting the largest vessels. Their plasma cannons, far more powerful than the automated platforms, tore through alien shields like paper. Morrison coordinated his attack with ruthless efficiency. Each human ship would appear next to an alien capital ship, fire a devastating salvo, and jump away before the enemy could respond. Then they would appear somewhere else and do it again. The aliens could not defend against attacks coming from every direction at once. They could not predict where the humans would appear next. A Zytharian battleship exploded, its reactor breached by a direct hit. A Vexian carrier lost its entire flight deck. A Gorlian dreadnought went dark, its power systems destroyed. The alien fleet was being torn apart, and they had barely scratched the human forces. Commander Sarah Mitchell led the boarding operations. Her Marines used specialized assault pods equipped with quantum drives. The pods would appear inside alien ships, bypassing their shields and armor entirely. The Marines would storm through the vessel, capturing key systems and forcing surrenders. Mitchell's team targeted Krelvar's flagship. Their pod materialized in a secondary hangar bay. The Marines moved fast, using their training and superior equipment to overwhelm the surprised alien crew. They fought their way to the bridge, meeting fierce resistance but never slowing down. Human weapons and tactics honed through centuries of warfare proved devastatingly effective. Krelvar watched in horror as human soldiers appeared on his bridge. He tried to order his guards to fight, but they were already down. Mitchell walked up to him, removed her helmet, and smiled. She informed him that his flagship was now under human control. He was a prisoner. She advised him to order the rest of the fleet to surrender. Krelvar, for the first time in his life, felt true fear. He gave the order. The alien fleet stopped fighting. The ships that could still maneuver began moving away from Earth, limping toward the edge of the system. The ships that were too damaged to move surrendered in place. The Battle of Saul was over. It had lasted less than 3 hours. The numbers were staggering. 73 alien ships had been destroyed or captured. Another 42 were so heavily damaged, they would never fight again. The remaining ships fled in complete disorder. Human casualties were 47 dead and 93 wounded. No human ship had been destroyed. It was the most one-sided military engagement in recorded galactic history. Admiral Collins watched the alien fleet retreat. He had given orders not to pursue. He wanted survivors. He wanted witnesses to return to the Senate and tell everyone what had happened. He wanted the galaxy to know that attacking Earth was suicide. The message would be clear. Humanity could not be defeated. Not by numbers. Not by force. Not by anyone. Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie, looking at the wreckage floating through space. He felt no joy in the victory. He had followed orders and done his duty. But these aliens had families, homes, lives. They had died because their leaders made a bad decision. He hoped the Senate would learn from this. He hoped there would be no more battles like this one. Krelvar sat in a holding cell on Icarus Station. He had been treated well. Human doctors had tended his wounds. He had been given food, water, and a comfortable place to rest. It confused him. He had come to destroy Earth. He had expected to be tortured or executed. Instead, he was being treated like a guest. He did not understand these humans at all. Ambassador Catherine Blake came to visit him. She sat down across from him and looked into his eyes. She told him that Earth did not want war. They never had. They just wanted to be treated with respect. She asked him if he understood now why the quarantine had been a mistake. Krelvar, his pride broken, nodded slowly. He understood. He finally understood. Across the galaxy, the news of the battle spread like wildfire. The Senate's great fleet had been destroyed. The humans had won without even trying. The footage of the battle was broadcast on every network. Species that had voted for the quarantine began reconsidering their positions. Species that had supported Earth felt vindicated. The Senate itself was thrown into chaos. Some senators demanded revenge. Others called for immediate negotiations. A few began drafting motions to lift the quarantine and grant Earth membership. The old order was crumbling. The power structure that had existed for thousands of years was falling apart. And at the center of it all was Earth, waiting to see what the galaxy would do next. President Martinez addressed the people of Earth. She told them that the battle had been won, but the war for respect was not over. Earth would continue to stand firm. They would continue to demand equal treatment. They would continue to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The quarantine had been their greatest challenge. Now it would become their greatest triumph. 6 months after the Battle of Saul, Ambassador Catherine Blake stood in the Galactic Senate chamber once again. But this time everything was different. The chamber was full, packed with representatives from species across the galaxy. Some faces were friendly, others were hostile. Many were simply curious. They all wanted to see what would happen next. The Senate had been arguing for months about what to do with Earth. The traditionalists, led by the elder species, insisted that humanity must still be contained. They argued that the Battle of Saul proved humans were dangerous. They said Earth's military power was a threat to galactic peace. They wanted stronger sanctions, more restrictions, total isolation, but the reformists saw things differently. They were mostly younger species, those that had joined the Senate in the last few thousand years. They looked at Earth and saw themselves. They remembered how the elder species had treated them when they were new. They remembered the condescension, the restrictions, the slow acceptance. They did not want that to continue. Blake had been working behind the scenes for months. She had met with dozens of species, building coalitions, making promises, offering cooperation. She had convinced many of them that Earth was not a threat but an opportunity, a chance to remake the Senate into something better, something more fair. Now it was time to present her case publicly. She stepped forward and began to speak. Her voice was clear and confident. She did not ask for mercy or understanding. She made demands. Earth wanted full Senate membership with all rights and privileges. Earth wanted recognition of its territorial claims throughout human space. Earth wanted technology sharing agreements that benefited everyone, not just the elder species. But the most controversial demand was this. The Senate voting system had to change. No longer could the elder species use their ancient privileges to dominate decisions. Every species would have equal voting power, regardless of how long they had been members. The Senate would truly represent all its members, not just the oldest and most powerful. The chamber erupted in shouting. The traditionalists were outraged. They called Blake's demands impossible, offensive, ridiculous. How dare a species that had been denied membership make demands of the Senate? How dare they threaten the order that had kept peace for millennia? Several delegations walked out in protest, refusing to even listen to the rest of Blake's speech. Blake waited for the chaos to settle. Then she continued. She explained that Earth was not making threats. They were offering partnership. But if the Senate chose to reject their offer, Earth would move forward without them. They would build their own coalition with the species that wanted change. The galaxy would split into competing power blocks. Was that really what the Senate wanted? From Earth, Dr. Lisa Grant was watching the proceedings with interest. She knew that Blake's success or failure would determine the future. But Grant also knew something that the Senate did not. She had already made another breakthrough. The quantum displacement drive was just the beginning. She was working on something even more revolutionary: dimensional fold technology. If the quantum drive made ships appear anywhere instantly, the dimensional fold would make distance meaningless. Ships could exist in multiple locations at once. They could travel between dimensions, accessing parts of the universe that normal physics said were impossible to reach. It would make the quantum drive look primitive by comparison. Grant made a decision. She contacted Blake and told her to make an offer to the Senate. Earth would share the quantum displacement technology with any species that agreed to join the reformed Senate. They would help other species build their own quantum drives. They would teach them the science, provide the materials, assist with implementation. All they asked in return was equal treatment and a commitment to the new galactic charter. Blake was surprised by the offer. She asked Grant if she was sure. Sharing their greatest military advantage seemed risky, but Grant explained her reasoning. Humanity's strength was not in hoarding technology. It was in innovation. By the time other species learned to build quantum drives, humans would have moved on to dimensional folds. And by the time anyone caught up to that, Humans would have invented something new, always staying ahead, always pushing forward. That was the human way. Blake presented the offer to the Senate. The reaction was immediate. The younger species were thrilled. Access to quantum drive technology would change everything for them. They would no longer be dependent on the elder species for protection and transportation. They would be able to defend themselves, explore on their own terms, compete as equals. The traditionalist coalition began to fracture. Some of the elder species recognized that refusing Earth's offer would be foolish. If the younger species gained quantum drives through Earth's help, they would form a powerful bloc that could challenge the old order anyway. Better to accept the changes and try to shape them than to be swept aside by them. One by one, species that had walked out of the chamber returned. They asked questions about the technology sharing agreement. They wanted guarantees, assurances, details. Blake provided everything they asked for. Earth was serious about this offer. They wanted partners, not subjects. Senator Krelvar, who had been released from Earth custody as a gesture of good faith, surprised everyone by speaking in support of Blake's proposal. He stood before the Senate and admitted his mistakes. He had underestimated humanity. He had let fear and pride cloud his judgment. He had helped create a crisis that nearly destroyed the Senate itself. Now it was time to learn from those mistakes and build something better. His speech changed the mood in the chamber. If even Krelvar, humanity's greatest opponent, could acknowledge Earth's right to membership, perhaps there was hope for compromise. The debate continued for days, but slowly a consensus began to form. The old order could not continue. Change was inevitable. The question was whether the Senate would guide that change or be destroyed by it. Finally, the vote was called. The motion was complex, containing dozens of provisions, but at its heart it was simple. Earth would be granted full Senate membership. The voting system would be reformed to give all species equal power. A new galactic charter would be written, one that protected the rights of all member species. And Earth would share quantum drive technology with any species that signed the charter. The final count was 512 votes in favor, 335 votes against. It was not unanimous. Many species still opposed the changes, but it was enough. The motion passed. Earth was officially a member of the Galactic Senate. The quarantine was lifted. Humanity had won. Blake stood in the center of the chamber as the vote was announced. She felt exhausted but triumphant. They had done it. Not through war, not through threats, but through determination and the willingness to offer something valuable. Earth had forced the galaxy to accept them as equals. In the following months, dozens of species signed the new Galactic Charter. Teams of human scientists and engineers traveled across the galaxy, helping them build quantum drives. Dr. Grant established a joint research institute where human and alien scientists worked together on new projects. The barriers between species began to break down. Commander Jake Morrison accepted a teaching position at the Galactic Naval Academy. Young officers from hundreds of species came to learn from the man who had revolutionized space combat. Morrison taught them not just tactics but philosophy. He taught them that the greatest weapon was not technology or numbers, but the will to adapt and overcome any obstacle. Admiral Frank Collins was appointed the first Supreme Commander of the Allied Defense Force, a new multi-species military organization. Its mission was to protect all member species and prevent any single species from dominating through force. Collins built it from the ground up, incorporating the best practices from every species while adding human innovations in tactics and technology. Blake herself was elected to the new executive council that governed the reformed Senate. She worked tirelessly to ensure that no species would ever face the kind of rejection that humanity had experienced. She became known as the architect of the new galactic order, the woman who had turned humanity's greatest defeat into the catalyst for positive change. 5 years after joining the Senate, Blake stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the new Senate headquarters built in orbit around Earth. She watched ships from 1,000 different species arrive and depart. The station was always busy, always full of life. Species that had once barely acknowledged each other now worked side by side. Commander Morrison joined her at the viewport. He had just returned from teaching a class that included students from Earth, Zythar Vexar, and a dozen other worlds. They had worked together on a combat simulation, human and alien side by side. It had been impossible just a few years ago. Now it was normal. Blake reflected on how far they had come. Earth had been rejected, isolated, dismissed as primitive and dangerous. The Senate had voted to contain them, confident that humanity could be controlled. That vote had been their last mistake. It had forced humanity to prove themselves in the most dramatic way possible. Now Earth was not just a member of the Senate. They were its reluctant leader, the species that had shown everyone that change was possible. Morrison smiled and said they never wanted to rule the galaxy. They just wanted a fair chance to be part of. 20 years had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Senate. An entire generation had grown up knowing only the reformed galaxy. Children born after the vote grew up in a universe where humans and aliens lived, worked, and studied together. The old divisions were fading. The old prejudices were dying. Dr. Lisa Grant stood in her laboratory, now much larger and more advanced than the one on Icarus Station. She was older now, her hair completely white, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Around her, human and alien scientists worked side by side on projects that would have seemed like magic 20 years ago. The dimensional fold drive was now operational. Ships could travel instantly between dimensions, opening up regions of space that had been forever beyond reach. Grant looked at the newest generation of researchers and felt proud. There was something beautiful about watching a young human scientist explain quantum theory to an alien colleague, or an alien engineer teaching a human about crystalline energy matrices. Knowledge flowing freely, no barriers, no restrictions. This was what the galaxy should have been all along. A young Zytharian scientist named Vec approached Grant with a question about dimensional physics. Grant smiled. 20 years ago, his people had voted to quarantine Earth. Now here he was, working in a human laboratory, learning from human scientists. Times had changed. People had changed. The galaxy had changed. Grant answered his question patiently, taking time to make sure he understood the concepts. When he thanked her and returned to his workstation, she felt a warmth in her chest. This was worth all the sleepless nights, all the failures, all the struggles. They had built something that would outlast them all. A galaxy united by curiosity and cooperation, rather than divided by fear and suspicion. On the planet Zentara Prime, Senator Krelvar walked through the streets of the capital. He was old now, his steps slower than they once were, but he still came to the Senate every day, still participated in debates, still tried to guide his people toward a better future. His grandchildren studied at human universities. His daughter commanded a ship in the Allied Defense Force. His family had embraced the new order in ways he could never have imagined. He often thought about the vote he had championed so many years ago. The vote to quarantine Earth. The vote that had been meant to protect the galaxy but had instead nearly destroyed it. He had been so certain that he was right, so confident that humanity needed to be contained. How wrong he had been. Krelvar had spent the last 20 years trying to make amends. He worked with Ambassador Blake to help other species transition to the new order. He advocated for younger species that faced discrimination. He taught courses on galactic history, using his own mistakes as examples of what not to do. He could not undo the past, but he could help build a better future. In the Galactic Naval Academy, Commander Jake Morrison finished another day of teaching. He was retired from active duty now, but he found teaching more rewarding than he had expected. His students came from hundreds of different species. They learned from each other as much as they learned from him. Human tactical thinking combined with alien strategic traditions created new approaches that were better than either alone. One of his best students was a young woman named Amy Carter, the daughter of a cargo hauler captain who had been saved by human ships during Operation Checkmate. She had grown up hearing stories about the mysterious human warships that appeared from nowhere to protect merchants from pirates. Now she was learning to command those same ships, working alongside alien classmates who shared her passion for exploration and defense. Morrison watched his students and thought about the Battle of Saul. He remembered the destruction, the fear in alien voices, the chaos of combat. He was glad that today's generation would probably never experience anything like that. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still disputes, still problems, still conflicts, but they were resolved through negotiation and compromise now, not violence. Admiral Frank Collins stood on the bridge of the Allied Defense Force flagship, watching a joint exercise between human, Zytharian, and Vexian squadrons. The ships moved in perfect coordination, using tactics developed through years of cooperation. It was beautiful to watch. Three species that had once been enemies, now working together as if they had always been allies. Collins thought about the day he had stood in Earth's command center and watched the alien fleet approach. He remembered the trap he had set, the battle that had changed everything. He was proud of what they had accomplished. But he was more proud of what came after. Anyone could win a battle. Building lasting peace was much harder and much more important. The Allied Defense Force had become the most respected military organization in the galaxy. Not because it was the most powerful, though it was, but because it truly represented all species equally. Every member species contributed ships and personnel. Every member species had a voice in strategic decisions. It was what the old Senate should have been but never was. Ambassador Catherine Blake prepared to retire. She had served on the Executive Council for 20 years, helping guide the reformed Senate through its growing pains. She had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and helped dozens of new species join the galactic community. Now it was time to let younger voices lead. The galaxy did not need her anymore. It had learned to govern itself fairly. Her replacement would be a young diplomat named Kevin Price who had grown up in the New Order. He had never known the old Senate. He could not remember when humans and aliens were suspicious of each other. For him, cooperation was natural. That was good. That was how it should be. The old generation had fought for change. The new generation would live in the world that change created. Blake returned to Earth for a ceremony honoring those who had served during the crisis 20 years ago. President Martinez was there, now elderly but still sharp. Admiral Collins attended, as did Commander Morrison. Dr. Grant came from her laboratory. Even Senator Krelvar traveled from Zentara Prime to participate. They gathered not to celebrate war, but to remember the lessons learned from conflict. The ceremony included a viewing of the archived recording of the original Senate vote. The vote that denied Earth membership. The vote that imposed the quarantine. Young people in the audience watched in shock. They could not imagine a galaxy that would treat any species that way. The idea seemed barbaric to them. That was progress. That was hope. After the recording ended, Blake gave a speech. She talked about the importance of treating all species with respect. She talked about the dangers of fear and prejudice. She talked about how humanity's response to rejection had been not to seek revenge, but to prove their worth and then share their success with others. That, she said, was the real lesson. Not that humans were special, but that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. The Senate archives preserved the vote as a historical lesson. Every new senator was required to view it and study it. Accompanying the recording was a simple plaque that read, "Those who seek to contain any species will always fail. Those who embrace cooperation will achieve wonders beyond imagination." It was a reminder, a warning, and a promise. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of voting against a species simply because they were young or different. In her laboratory, Dr. Grant made another breakthrough. She had been working on a project so ambitious that most scientists thought it was impossible. A way to travel not just between points in space or between dimensions, but between different universes entirely. The multiverse, once just a theory, was becoming accessible. She smiled. By the time other species mastered dimensional folds, humans would be exploring entirely new realities. A reporter asked her if she planned to share this new discovery as freely as the quantum drive. Grant laughed. "Of course," she said. "That was what humans did. They did not hoard knowledge. They did not keep discoveries to themselves. They shared freely, knowing that lifting others up made everyone stronger. They did not just reach for the stars. They brought everyone with them." On Unity Station, Blake looked out at the galaxy one last time before returning to Earth. Ships moved through space, carrying people and goods between thousands of worlds. Human, Zetharian, Vexian, Gorlian, and hundreds of other species all working together. The station itself was a monument to cooperation, built by dozens of species using technologies they had developed together. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. The rejection, the quarantine, the determination to prove themselves, the battle that changed everything. The reforms that followed. It had been hard. It had required sacrifice, but it had been worth it. The galaxy was better now, fairer, more open, more willing to give everyone a chance. The Galactic Senate had voted against Earth. They had seen humanity as a threat, a problem to be contained. They had used their power to isolate and restrict a young species that only wanted acceptance. That vote had been meant to protect the galaxy. Instead, it had nearly destroyed the Senate itself. It had forced humanity to prove themselves in the most dramatic way possible. It had sparked reforms that remade galactic society from top to bottom. The vote against Earth had indeed been the Senate's last mistake. But it had also been the catalyst for something better. The old order had tried to contain humanity. In doing so, they had forced humanity to become